Iran has submitted a 14-point response to the American proposal, and Washington hasn't even formally confirmed its reply. Yet Trump is already calling the whole thing unacceptable. Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil passes, stays shut. Tehran is telling the world that America faces a choice between a military operation they're calling impossible and what they describe as a bad deal. That's not diplomacy. That's a threat. Joining me now are Marcus Webb, our defense and security analyst, and Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor. Marcus, let me start with you. Is Trump's approach of maintaining the blockade and publicly dismissing Iran's proposals the right strategy, or is he boxing himself into a corner with no exit?
Thanks, Emma. Let me be absolutely direct. Trump's instinct here is correct, and the foreign policy establishment's discomfort with his approach is precisely why his approach is correct. Iran's 14-point proposal isn't diplomacy. It's a delay tactic dressed up in diplomatic language. The mullahs have been playing this game since 1979. They submit proposals, they create the appearance of engagement, European capitals pressure Washington to ease off, and Tehran pockets the relief while advancing its nuclear program. We have seen this movie before. It's called the JCPOA, and it ended with Iran enriching uranium at 60%. Trump's refusal to validate Iran's framing, his insistence that Iran hasn't paid a big enough price. That is strategically sound. The blockade is real leverage, and you don't surrender real leverage for a 14-point document from a regime that has lied to the IAEA for decades. What concerns me is not Trump's instincts, it's whether the State Department bureaucracy will slowly hollow out his position before it produces results.
But Marcus, here's the devil's advocate position. By publicly calling the proposal unacceptable before it's even been formally reviewed, isn't Trump undermining his own negotiating position? If you tell the other side nothing will work before you've read the document, why would they keep engaging? And, Sophia, what's your take on this? Because the Strait of Hormuz staying shut isn't just a geopolitical problem, it's hitting markets hard right now.
Well, look, Marcus is right that Iran's track record is appalling, and I won't defend the regime for a second. But here's what I think Marcus is missing on the tactical question. The economic pressure being applied right now is a double-edged sword. Yes, Iran is hurting, but a closed Strait of Hormuz is also hammering energy markets globally. It's not just Tehran feeling pain. Every extra dollar on the oil price is a tax on Western consumers, on manufacturers, on supply chains that are still recovering from years of disruption. The data is clear: 20 million barrels a day through that strait. That's not an abstraction. And if this drags on for another 3 to 6 months with no resolution, the trajectory suggests we're looking at energy price volatility that feeds directly back into Western inflation figures. Trump needs a win here, and a win requires actually engaging with the substance of what Iran has submitted, even if the answer is ultimately no.
I hear what Sophia is saying, but with respect, that misses the point entirely. The economic pain of a closed Hormuz is real. I'm not dismissing that. But the alternative, releasing pressure on a nuclear-armed threshold state to relieve short-term energy market stress, is catastrophically worse. You know what's more expensive than high oil prices? A nuclear Iran. A nuclear Iran that funds Hezbollah with impunity, that can threaten Israel's existence openly, that every Sunni state in the Gulf then feels compelled to match with their own nuclear program. That's the real economic catastrophe we're trying to prevent. Short-term pain for long-term strategic stability is not just acceptable, it's necessary. And frankly, if Western European governments are pressuring Washington to ease off because their voters are annoyed about petrol prices, that tells you everything about European strategic seriousness. Which is to say, there is none.
Here's what I want to know, because this is the question that actually matters in the next 6 months. Tehran says America faces a choice between an impossible military operation and a bad deal. If that framing takes hold internationally, does the U.S. lose the narrative even if it wins the pressure campaign? Sophia, where do you see this going?
The way I see this playing out, the critical variable is European capitals. If France, Germany, and the UK break ranks, and history suggests they will, and start offering Iran a diplomatic off-ramp that bypasses Washington, the trajectory suggests America's leverage gets diluted before it produces a substantive agreement. Iran knows this. That's why the 14-point proposal exists, not to make a deal with Trump, but to make Trump look unreasonable to Brussels and London. The real risk here is that the US wins the pressure game, but loses the coalition game, and ends up isolated on Iran policy just as it was after the 2018 JCPOA withdrawal. If that happens, the blockade becomes politically unsustainable within 6 months.
Here's what concerns me most, and it's something neither the media nor the markets are properly pricing in. Israel is watching this negotiation in real time, and Israel's calculus is existential, not diplomatic. If Iran uses the 14-point process to run out the clock, if enrichment continues behind the diplomatic smokescreen, and if the US gets dragged into a protracted negotiation that produces nothing, the risk is that Israel acts unilaterally. And when Israel acts, the US gets drawn in regardless of what Trump wants. The trajectory there doesn't end with slightly higher petrol prices. It ends with a regional war that nobody in Washington has actually prepared for. That is the scenario that should be keeping people awake at night.
Gentlemen, and I use that term loosely given what just happened, powerful stuff from both of you. Marcus Webb, Sophia Reeves, thank you. One thing's for certain, somewhere in Tehran tonight, someone is hoping the West's attention span runs out before America's oil reserves do.